A little bit about like how political this is, and then talk about the work that the coalition's been doing. So just to ground this in the realities of the struggle and the fight that we're going to face moving forward with the comp plan once our hands start to really get into it with all the chapters too. David Grasso proposed this project for the health impact assessment legislation, yet when we went to his office just this past Friday, he refused to meet with us. Refused. We had a scheduled meeting with him where his door was open and he was sitting in his office and he could hear his chief of staff and one of his legislative directors arguing with us in the office about how we had a meeting and he wouldn't come out. They said, we'll meet with you, but he's not coming. And we were like, why not? And we never really got an answer. But it may be because we mentioned we were going to talk about Brooklyn Manor. I don't know. It may be because there was someone who was going to film, but she wouldn't have filmed if he asked not to. Like, we weren't pushy on that either. So even though we have some council people who may, sorry for not talking loud enough, even if we have some council people who may be doing good things in one lane that's safe for them, there's another lane that they're not necessarily willing to cross into for political reasons. Trajan talked about that openly today. He talked about it openly. That's McDuffie's ward. I'm not going to touch it. That's our policy. Yeah. And that happens all the time. And we can understand, like, I get that. Logically I understand that as a person. It doesn't make it right.
I don't get it.
I'm saying I can understand where they're coming from. It doesn't make it right. Because you are still representing everyone here, and the decision you make there is going to have an impact on the decision that you make over here and stuff like that. So I wanted to put that into context again in the context of the health assessment impact, because I think it's important at each phase that we recognize what people are doing and respect that they're doing some good things and give them credit where credit's due, but they're still politicians at the end of the day. And so that's why these meetings are so important. That's why having these continued big group meetings where we can learn and understand and get more people on our side, or on the side of understanding how development is truly happening, is so important. And with that, I see a couple hands, but let me just move forward and then we'll take questions at the end. We've been having 3 working groups putting in a ton of work over the past couple of months, or month I guess, for the Grassroots Planning Coalition. One was on outreach, one was on communications, and one was on research. And so I want one point person from each of those groups really briefly to just give like a 1-minute update on what you've been doing so that the rest of the people here know kind of where the committee stands. So why don't I start with outreach? I know Parisa and Shabazz were doing that, but one of you wants to, no, Chris was research. Yeah.
Tony.
Yeah, so we're gonna do outreach first. So do you guys wanna give a brief statement?
Yeah, so just very briefly on outreach, we've got a couple objectives. One is to connect with the 450 plus people who come to these meetings and make sure that they are staying involved. So answer some questions and encourage people to come to the next meeting, not just a robocall, which we use for efficiency, but real connection. And so we had some people come in the office and help phone bank. Raise your hand if you help phone bank. Mr. Jackson, Zoila. Well, it was the people who had signed up for the committee last time. So if you were willing to be part of those things, okay, last meeting when we had the breakout, during that, people said, I'll help with phone banking. And so those were the people that we focused on but we still have a lot more work to do on that, but we did have a pretty good start on it. And then in terms of another focus is, of course, the ANC outreach. We didn't get super far with that yet, but we did get before ANC 4B of this last month and got the resolution passed. The resolution has also been approved by the Federation of Citizens Associations, and the civics are also in favor. They didn't have a quorum, but they also support it. And then I think you're ANC too, right? Didn't your ANC pass it?
We passed the first resolution back earlier in the year.
Okay.
And so and that did not even go easy, but we can
revisit.
We can do this maybe in January.
Right. So now that we have a little bit more time on the framework, we'll probably the outreach committee will probably work to get January, February presentations and at ANCs and civics, and get the resolution passed. And then the last thing is that we all agreed at the last meeting, the outreach committee agreed to take the leadership in organizing community forums for each of the the area elements of the comp plan. So they're not quite just based on the wards, but you know, there's area, the city's been divided into, I think it's 11 area elements.
Like Rock Creek East.
Areas, yeah. And so we're gonna work with organizations within those neighborhoods to hold a forum, at least one forum on the amendments, and you know, so which will be introduced at some point next year. But we see it also as a base building opportunity, so we may also try to do some, before the actual town hall or community forum on the amendments, do like a reading session where people can be introduced to what does it say about their communities, and then, you know, do another session where we analyze the amendments that are being proposed and mobilize people to make some changes. So we'll be asking everybody for help with that, and that'll be a great opportunity for people, all the 450 plus people, to engage in their neighborhoods. Any questions on outreach?
Ready for something that happens in January, like combining with the meeting in January? Are you ready for your group to come up with a plan?
We can, yeah, yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you have other questions about outreach or want to get involved in the outreach committee, see Parisa before you leave so she can take down your contact information. Thank you guys for doing that work. Let's do research next. So either Chris or someone else, I don't know.
Tony, you want?
I missed
I mean, so we had an awesome, at the last month's gathering, right?
Yes, we did, yes, we met one time.
I mean, we broke out into research committee, Tony was there, there was so many people, William Jordan.
Yeah.
It was about 30 people in the room that signed up for came out to the research committee. Then we had a meeting a week after that, just before Thanksgiving, to actually do work. What's the point of this? I mean, we have like principles in our resolution, right? We have 8 principles, I believe, of things that we want to see in the framework element. Our goal here is to get these principles in the framework element so that we don't have to appeal anymore, that it's built in, it's baked into development, these basic principles of equity, right? And so the research team has been trying to find sources of data that would now back up what we intuitively know through our lived experiences and what we're witnessing around the city as problems that these principles will fix. And so what we want to do is dig up the sources and the data that supports our principles, right? So we've started that, and we have a shared Google Drive,
yes.
right? And we got
finding articles and
Tony's been, we found a bunch of stuff, both on government sites and on private sites, showing some of the disparities we're seeing, the vacancy in these new buildings, these giant new buildings they're building, that they say we have to have all this housing for, they're vacant. There's vacancies. We're finding them in this data, okay?
Well, another thing, I wanted to piggyback on that. Another thing that we have to realize is that a lot of these new buildings are vacant because it's in favor of the developers. They don't need 100% occupancy. You know, so we're trying to make sure that we have, you know, some place for people to live and stuff like that. There are plenty of vacant apartments, but they don't want those places full. They want them halfway full because it doesn't matter.
They can write it off.
They can
on
write
their
it
taxes.
off. Right. They pay less taxes.
Right. So we're doing research on things like that. We're trying to find the district's return on investment. So for all these giveaways of the land and the tax breaks and the zoning, what are we getting back? And by the way, the promises that were you know testified to at the council under oath, mind you, are they living up to them? I mean, we already have an auditor's report that says they're not. So the auditor's already done a lot of the work for us. We just need to emphasize this and get this to the comms team, to the communications team, to get it, package it, and get it out. So we're doing the research. If you want to get involved in this, let us know. We have a calendar watch we want to set up too, where folks can look weekly at the council calendar, see what issues are coming up, so we can also get that out through the comms team that like are pertinent to us and what we're trying to do. And then also looking at the zoning commission calendar and start to warn people about projects that are coming down the pipe. So these are the sort of things we're doing. If you're interested in, just by show of hands, if you're interested in doing some research, okay, I'm going to hand out this material. It has our information on it, and then we can go from there. But let me know at the end as well.
We're always playing catch up. We need to know what's coming down the pipe.
If you're interested in research, take
Thank
one.
you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so last but certainly not least, the communications. Anybody from that group, just to preface this, there was a smaller group doing work on communications before. That's when we started doing the tweets and getting more into social media. We handed those out previously. But obviously the communications issue is huge. This is who we are presented to the public. This is getting our message out in a way that's simple enough for anyone to understand it. So we've expanded that to Rebecca, do you want to comment on that, or anyone else from the team want to give an update, or I can do it? Sure, I will do it. Okay. I wasn't at the last meeting, so if I miss anything for your long-term plans, let me know. But the handouts that we handed out, the packet, were created by people from the communications team, specifically for council. But they really took a lot of time just breaking down the resolution, like I mentioned. I know this is some stuff that you've seen before, and it was really just a matter of consolidating everything and making sure that all of our points as of now are simple enough for council and something that we can hand out to broader community members too, so that they can kind of get on board with where we're at. So that includes the letter breakdown of the resolution itself, the chart like I mentioned, and then also a document that I think we may have mentioned before, but this kind of is just a preface for the next steps for the comprehensive plan as a whole, where we're trying to make it so that council actually cares about it and uses it as a tool versus just having it be this thing that they don't really know about. And one way to do that is to make sure that each chapter is reviewed in the council committees, not just as a whole, in the committee of the whole. So if you break down, for example, the housing chapter should be looked at in the housing committee that's run by Anita Vance. That just makes logical sense. And that way they'll care more about it, hopefully, and actually use it and be more likely to compare pending legislation with this current document to make sure that everything aligns. So that's one of the documents in there too. And then I know at the last meeting we had handed out, I think, a letter in response to the Office of Planning's new language that they put out in August that talked about how they wanted to make even more changes or amendments and incorporate language on affordable housing and all this stuff. And there was a response letter that people had drafted up that were like, this may sound good on the surface, but it actually doesn't really do much, and here's why. We decided that for the purposes of council, we didn't want that to derail our conversations or just the conversations in general, because that's not submitted legislation or anything. It's just another thought that OP had, and they were like, here, like, listen to us now. So we did want to respond to it and acknowledge it, but not have that be the whole thing. And we decided that it would be better to have some bullet points of those letters or of those responses, and that's also in this document too. And I don't know, I think I covered everything that's in there. You don't have that? Okay, we'll get you one. They're up on the front table. So that's like the gist of what communications has been doing right now. I think there's still longer term plans to continue our social media strategy to reach other people. And I'm sure there will be more things coming up in the pipeline too, but that's kind of what we've been doing for right now. So if anyone's interested in joining that team, or if you know anyone who's good at graphics or, little videos or stuff like that, I think there's ways that we can be very creative in how we present our materials, but feel free to let me know before we head out here today. All right. So we were gonna do breakouts, but we're not gonna do that anymore. We have a little bit extra time, and since this is our last meeting of the year, I was gonna see if anyone had any other updates, thoughts, questions.
Suggestions.
Yeah.
The steering committee will be meeting to talk about, initial planning for next year, and then at our next big meeting in January, we'll share thoughts about the yearly plan with you and get your input. But you could start the ball rolling now if there are like hopes, dreams, visions for next year. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I can write them down.
Yep, okay. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to say, just a quick idea, is that when it comes to these council people who don't want to meet with you, it's a good idea to get your pen from Omarosa and use it to record what they're saying, so that when they say we don't want to meet with you, you at least have that recorded. But for those who didn't quite get the pen thing, she had this pen that actually recorded stuff. It wasn't the writing pen. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to say was this: is that had some involvement with the Barry Farms people. I won't say that I'm regular. I won't say that I'm the leader. That's not the case at all. But for those of you who care about the Barry Farms issue, I did speak to one of the architects who was involved earlier today. I had fallen out of the loop and didn't know what was going on, and she gave me the update, and it was a very positive one. The architects are still involved in figuring out how to make the new Barry Farm development what the current and former residents want. They're spending a lot of time looking into the historical context of Barry Farm and how, its connection to slavery and everything between slavery and now. And they're really going deep. That's why it's taking so long. But also, they have come up with some ideas that might reduce, if not eliminate, the high rises that Barry Farm residents don't want. And they're looking at all of what the residents have said they want, those who have spoken up anyway, and it's looking good, so it's taking a while, but the idea is still being worked on, even if you don't hear a lot about it. Do know that there are people behind the scenes working on this stuff, and you will see a result probably sometime early next year.
Just to clarify, he's talking about the resident-led plan that Empower DC and the Berry Farm Tenants and Allies Association has been working on, and we hired a development, community planner and architect to help. We're also looking for a development consultant that can help us with the financial part. So we are actually trying to put together a plan that's, rivals what developers have, but that represents the vision of the residents. So that's where we're going. Okay, so I see William, Ms. Davis, Kimon, Reggie, and Ricky. Okay, William.
I would suggest the council website. So usually at this time of the year, when you get to the last legislative session, they're going to use emergency legislation to push everything. So watch the site they'll do a hearing, maybe, but then they won't review a bill twice. They'll push it into next year, but they're going to use emergency legislation, and sometimes that 60 days or 90 days is enough to get done what they wanted to do. So in Ward 1, they would do that, the developer would break ground, and then it would expire, but then the deed is already done. So they'll use emergency legislation. Second thing, just be aware that at Park Morton, which was another new community site, the Housing Authority is going to move to get rid of Bill First. They're going to do exactly what they did at Barry Farm. So,
Get rid of Bill.
so with new communities, you're supposed to build the new units.
Oh, build first.
Build
I
first.
thought you said bill.
Build first. Build first. The new units, and then tear down the old units, and that was a promise. But right now, there's an effort to give everybody a voucher, scatter them to the wind, and level it. So even though they talk about it as though the old plan is still in place with phased development and all this kind of stuff. So just be aware, go to the council website and actually pull the legislation and read it from now to the close of the session, because there's all kind of stuff being stuck in legislation that we're going to miss.
Can I just say on Park Morton, they're doing it under the guise of environmental conditions, but not being transparent about what the conditions are that they claim to have found that are so bad that they have to move people immediately and go back on the Build First promise. And I was at a meeting at the Housing Authority last month or so where they started to say, they said that they're doing this comprehensive environmental analysis across the city and that they're expecting there to be thousands of units that people will need to vacate. And so they're asking HUD to give them more vouchers. But again, why now, and, you know, is this being used as a ploy to kind of vacate places and privatize them? So we do have to be, you know, really watchful. I'm just gonna go through the list, but I'll add you. Ms. Davis?
I just wanna, thanks y'all for having us here, but I also wanna clear up some things, you know. I don't like when you lie to me. So, council member, he gone now, but whoever is under him can go back and tell him that why did you take all my information and said you was coming? You know I was under back office, okay? A lot, you know, some excuse is better than none. He took my information, he said, well, if he runs late, you know, he'll call. Don't lie and don't come out here and make yourself look like you try to be so important enough to say, well, I can't come across in somebody else's ward. All this water belongs to us in this city. And, you know, he needs to stop lying and do his job, and maybe, you know, we've been there to support him. So he could have came on over there. We was, I lead too, as he said. We in his ward supporting him. So what is the difference between a council person being out of one council person ward and us as tenants being in his ward helping him to fight for his cause? You know, so, you know, he need to get himself educated a little more. The next day that happened over there, I know we supposed to come in solidarity. I will continue to come because of it's the tenants, it's not him. And they forget that they work for us. Somebody gotta remind them that we, you know, that we told them
Check
that
him
we-
out.
Do they vote?
No,
it's the 18th.
It's the 18th.